And hey, welcome to the show, everybody. This is the weekly Jargon. I'm Abel Perez.
Jose Rodriguez.
And Rohi Zachariah.
Hey, fellas, glad to be back this week. You guys did a great job last week. I was taking a peek while I was on the road, and I was over at the Ag Show, the World Ag Show, hosted here in the Central Valley, just an hour away from beautiful Madera. And man, technology continues to become really prevalent, even in the ag world, where traditionally it's been a manual labor type environment, and so a lot of things, a lot of neat things to see out there. If you haven't been in the Ag Show, go check it out. You want to get there early because man, it gets packed. And but you just see a lot of technology, and it's amazing to see the advancements that we're making, or that people are able to take the agricultural world into. So have you guys ever been?
I've been to the location, but I haven't been when it's active. How long does that go for, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, it's a 3-day event.
3-day event, okay.
Yeah, 3-day event, and people from literally all over the world, are coming in here. And what you see is you get people like observing, I was talking to a couple people there, and it was, you get people who kind of try to take your ideas a little bit. They try to take your concepts and say, wow, this is how they're doing it here, right? Oh, they have a separator and this is how they're kind of designing it, right? And it's really not like a secret. I mean, I say it all the time. Like sometimes we get very secretive about our ideas, and because we think, oh, this person's going to steal them. But let's face it, as people, sometimes we have all the answers. We know what the recipes are, but we're very unlikely to actually execute on them, right? And so, if you have good ideas out there, I think, share them. And it's also this World Ag Expo actually works as kind of like a great networking thing. There's several different tents and actually like meeting tents where people kind of like congregate, mixer type environment. Bank of America, which is my company, we hosted a wine and cheese event, and so a nice big giant tent. We invited a bunch of people there, and people are just talking about sharing ideas and best practices, and hey, I might be able to use you to get my product to the next level, so why not leverage that? So there's a lot of that communal energy going on, where it's like, how do we get our ideas to that next level, or how do we take the world of agriculture to a level of ultimately more profitability and obviously doing it in a safer manner. So,
and I think it couldn't have been done at a better place, because truthfully, agriculture in the United States and in the world, a lot of that output comes from these counties surrounding us, just around right. We have Fresno County and Tulare County, which is they produce a lot of ag that is shipped out not only to the U.S. but outside of this country. So it's great to see that technology is starting to come across. But the technology that you experienced there, Abel, was it mainly replacing the human labor aspect of it, like actually fine tuning like the stuff that they do with fruit and or vegetables and stuff?
Yeah, there's some of it is right, and obviously it's to it's going to be to scale. A lot of these machinery or pieces of machinery, they're expensive, and so it is an investment for the farmer. And so when you have your traditional ag model or of farming, right, or farming model, where you pull your loan, you cover your expenses, and usually that loan's big enough for your labor. You know what that labor is going to be. So when these farmers are trying to engage in this new age concept, implementing technology, that initial investment is going to be far larger, right? And so so a lot of like my responsibility as a commercial lender in there is to try to find solutions to that problem, right? Well, we know that your tax preparer, your CPA, they all know how to do your books so where you continue to get approved for a $500,000 line of credit, so you can have some working capital and get your farm through the next season, right? But do those books get you in a position where you're qualifying for the $2-3 million loan that you're going to need for that initial investment to bring in all this machinery, right? And on top of that, you're still going to have working capital, because you still need employees while you're kind of working through it, right? You don't just throw the machines out there, they turn themselves on and start working. Now you have to start implementing training for employees to operate them. Your mechanics need to know how to fix them when issues go wrong. And so that aspect of it is a little bit can be challenging for farmers, that initial investment into it. So
It's a lot of good equipment, though, Rohi. What do you think?
I mean, it's a push that everybody's going to. I mean, like we talked about the casinos. I mean, they're reducing tables to put in slot machines because they don't call off and they don't get sick and
Yeah.
they don't want overtime or pay raises. They just keep on going.
right.
But I mean, but you get to a point of, let's think 10, 15, 20 years into the future, is there going to be a need for a single employee at that farm, or is a single farmer going to sit on his couch and just push buttons and be farming? And what does that mean for our the cost of our food? Is it actually going to go down or go to zero if it's so easy and so cost effective? Because you don't see that. That's the only thing I don't see is those pushes, like to get that new machine, is because it's going to be so much cheaper, but yet my food cost hasn't gone down. It's still
Right.
being going up. So
And I think you'll see that more, Rohi, because truthfully, it's not the farmer that owns the means
No,
of
of course, yeah.
production for food distribution, right? I mean, obviously, a lot of the food, like for example, in the Midwest, could be corn, for example, corn or wheat, and a lot of the corn is utilized to feed the cattle, which is a huge farming industry too, right? So, I mean, imagine just owning that whole, controlling that whole industry. Then you can pretty much set the tone as far as what the price would be, right? So here it is, farmer. I want you to grow corn, and I'm going to buy your corn, right? So now I'm going to set the price of what I think corn should be in order for me to sell the pound of beef that I'm going to sell out here, or the pound of pork, whatever the case may be. But owning those means of production and distribution, then it makes it harder for the farmer to dictate their prices. And it happens not only in the corn industry, but it happens in any type of orchard out there, unless you own it directly and it's going from farm to table directly from you, the local farmer. But you see it in many cases. I remember avocado becoming a very big industry in Mexico, right? So people rushed out there to try to grow a lot of these grows of avocado, but little did they know that essentially, these processing plants are owned by someone. Again, the distribution method of how you get it out to the U.S. It's not like your local farmer has the connections to make these exports, and then you get it done. You have to buy it at whatever that processing center or they may call it demand. I mean, and then you have tariffs involved, and sometimes these tariffs can certainly protect our local farmer from outside influence, because somebody may be able to grow that corn at a cheaper. True capitalism would say that, hey, I can grow this corn cheaper and provide a better product to you at a cheaper rate or a cheaper price. Therefore, your standard of living is better versus, well, there's only one price. And that's typically what you see. I mean, I don't know if you agree with me there, but maybe stepping into the weeds there, right?
Well, I think that's how the weed works too.
Yeah.
It's not just fruit and veggies. It's any type of product that's taken to the market. Has that same that same cadence that from the time it's grown to the time it hits the shelves, and what's that pricing? What does that mean to us, the consumer, right? So yeah, I mean, there's wars over it, right? Avocado wars. It's that serious. I mean that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, you see it a lot everywhere. I mean, obviously, you see farmers even locally here that grow almond, right? And they're nuts, right? Those are of high demand. But, I mean, I'm not saying they're speculative, but if you don't have a demand for them, or you have a bad season, or you sanction certain things in certain countries, and these are your biggest importers of nuts, it does affect the local farmer. And that could happen with milk. It could happen with other products that are around here. So I think they depend on their product being moved so that they can get paid and move on the next harvest or move on the next milking session when it is for dairy, right?
Yeah.
Who are their biggest consumers, right? And that farmer needs to be protected too, to a point where, hey, I need assurances that if my crop doesn't happen to go through, then what do I have? What's the safety net that I have?
Yeah.
And farmers have some safety nets. I'm not saying all farmers in all production or different types of crops, but they have some safety nets.
But I mean, but you'd think that there'd still be more of a push for people to go and do it themselves. You know, I mean, that's the thing we've talked about before. Food prices are going higher. Eggs you can't even find them. Milk, you can't find it. But nobody is going by and saying, you know, I'm gonna grow the Victory Garden this year. I'm gonna go put in a little something to subsidize, you know, my eating.
If we had that safety net too, I mean, and I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but if folks had a safety net of saying, hey, if we have a shortage in food and I can grow my own crops or I can grow my own food and maybe some safety net in case it doesn't happen, you know, how I can stimulate that to your point, you know, how do you get your hands into capital to help you, you know, start something like that, right? You could imagine the millions of people that we have here in California wanting all to have 5-10 acres. I don't think we can. I think it would be difficult.
But I think that's not what is needed. I mean, like the push. I mean, even if you had a 500 square foot backyard, instead of saying it's just cement and maybe a shade tree, if there was an incentive to say, hey, you know, grow a patch of tomatoes or something to just kind of help out or whatever you might eat, you know, or maybe share it with your community, but there is none of that, you know.
So how, and that's a good question. So how, I mean, I like where you're going with that. So how would you be able to provide an incentive? Like what would be the incentive to want to grow? I mean, aside from the fact that you want to live healthier, you want something that you know, you want to feel proud of what you grow, but what would be that incentive to say, you know what, we need you to start growing your own vegetables because you have the land to do it.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, I think at some point when you look at what is a farm and what does it take to qualify for the farm loans or farm subsidies or anything like that, just reduce that to a certain point where you don't have to, because I don't know what's required. I don't know if you got to have a certain acreage or you got to grow a certain amount of food before you break that farm labeling. But I would say it's the same thing that's already there. Just reduce it down to the average person that says, again, I can obtain it. It might be based on a percentage, so maybe I don't get $1 million loan because I'm only growing like a little patch of tomatoes, but make it accessible. And the thing is that when you look at like the government of the 40s and 50s, it was the push like this independence. It was an encouragement. Hey, grow that garden. Hey, you know, have a couple chickens. You know, something that was manageable that you could do even on a regular house. That's gone. It's kind of like, no, don't do any of that. It's bad. We don't want to do it. Just go to the store and buy it. It's okay.
It's cheaper to go that route, and to some extent, obviously, you know, the price of chickens, for example, you know, I mean, I don't know, I think they're still moderately affordable, right? I mean, especially if you go buy a rotisserie chicken here, like at Save Mart. By the way, they have great rotisserie chicken.
They do, yeah.
I mean, you can get that thing ready to eat for $6.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Just think
pretty cheap.
think about the intensive labor that it would take for you to, you know, butcher the chicken, and then you have to go out and pluck it and do all the stuff to fix it to where it becomes a rotisserie. But for $5, maybe.
Yeah.
$6, $10, I think you get two sides and maybe somehow.
But
It's
that's
not
what
bad.
I'm saying. That's why you
Yeah.
got to ask yourself, why is it $6 to them and not
Yeah.
$6 to me? That's what my point is that it should be that I can have that same chicken for $6, but because I can't, that's where the problem is. And you identify how they're getting it to $6 because it takes about the same amount of food. Obviously, they're probably injecting I don't know what into it, not Save Mart because of their base, but I'm saying like. That's my question is how can they grow it for $6 and have it prepared, cooked, ready to go, picking it up, and you say like, oh, if I go do it, it's gonna be like $20 for that chicken. That's what I'm saying the problem is.
And it may be like the economies of scale where maybe they have thousands of contracted chickens to go through it, whereas you and I may just have two. So I think the work for you and I to try to get to that price, I think it takes a lot more labor, more work. We don't have, I guess, the machinery or to operate that type of demand. But I'm sure that if you and I, Abel, and our families wanted to get together to say, hey, why don't we just start our own chicken farm and we provide chickens for ourselves?
Yeah.
Well, now, and I mean, what would be the cost? And who would, I mean, obviously you would have to define the operations part of it, how we would be involved in it. Are we just investors? Is there machines that do all that all for us? I mean, obviously they have that assembly deal done in a way where it's pretty cheap. Foster Farms or Saki farms or whatever farms are out there that are poultry, that's how they they scale it down to where it makes sense to sell it at maybe $4, and Save Mart may sell it at a bit more or maybe less.
Yeah.
But I think I like the direction there. I like that the concept. It fired some good ideas. But when we talk about like, I think that getting to that point right there, like your last like 20 words that you said, that's what scares people, right? That's what the average everyday person's like. I don't want to think about all that. I can't. I don't know how to process that. I don't know how to do the math on that and divvy up the, I can't. And so it's just like, I'm going to go buy it for $6 at the grocery store.
Yeah.
And so, meats are probably a lot more sophisticated. If you have a 10,000 square foot lot in your house, you're probably not going to be able to farm, cattle, or chickens. But with the idea that kind of stemmed from both of you guys' conversation was, how many tomatoes do you need in a week? How many tomatoes does the average family or household need in a week, right? Maybe 5 or 6, not a whole lot. You're not eating tomatoes with every meal. How many zucchinis do you need? How many potatoes, how many apples, and so on and so forth, right? And so if you were to take your street and take 10 of your neighbors and say, you grow the zucchini, you grow the tomatoes, you grow the apples, you could literally have a fruit basket, every single week, a fruit and veggie basket, and cut that entire expense out of your grocery bill every single week. And it's fresh, it's organic, it's, and it's right there, right? But the problem is we as people, we want it now. We want it instant. We want instant gratification. We want it now. We don't really want to have to do any extra to it. Oh, I got to work, and I'm on the city council, and I got meetings, and I can't tend to the to my little row of zucchinis so that my neighbors can eat, right?
Yeah.
But I think if we had that mindset, right, where it's, hey, let's do it ourselves, right? And it doesn't have to be, and you can do that. I've seen planter boxes from like here to the wall, which is maybe like 10 feet, 10 feet by 3 feet, where you can roll it on your concrete. It's full with dirt, and you can literally farm within that planter box, right? And that would feed you and your neighbors, right? Within their usage, right? But if we started having that mindset, I think it would evolve into other aspects of our lives to where we start realizing like, okay, this is how we start reducing that. And what does it do at the grocery store? It starts reducing demand. Yeah. Right. And so without that demand, well, then the prices have to come down, right? Because now we have an excess of supply. And so, it might pinch the farmer or it might pinch the distributor for a time being, but that just means, hey, we're okay, right? We don't need so much of that one product, and we certainly don't need you gouging up the prices of avocado and charging me an extra $2.50 at Subway just for adding, avocado.
But my point is, like Jose, you're saying economy of scale, and that as they get bigger, it gets cheaper, but at the same time, the quality goes down. The reason why your chickens or even your fruit and all the pesticides and all the stuff that goes into it is because they're so large. An individual can't tend to a single patch. Like if I have a patch this big of tomatoes, I can go out every couple of days and look and check each plant and on an individual scale attend to it, reducing maybe the water, reducing pesticides, reducing everything to give a better product. The point is that like that's why when you look at PG&E and our power, we should solve our power problems by just building gigantic power plant somewhere on the West Coast and serve California, but they don't. They're going now with this micro scale. It's all about community power plants. It's about having batteries in everybody's backyard and solar on everybody's roof because it just doesn't make sense anymore. You get to a certain point where that economy of scale doesn't work. You can't build it bigger, right? So that's what I'm saying with this food production. It has to be looked at the same way. Give a piece of community property if you have to. He said, like, what can the city do? Well, we're building parks. Well, now you see a lot of communities, especially like the ranchos. One of the ones I lived in before, they started having little community growing areas, right? It's instead of a park, they just 3-4 planters. You want to plant there, great. You don't want to, but at least the land is available because they know you don't necessarily have the land. I'm sure the water's coming from that area, so you're not necessarily paying for the water, so it can have some reduction in cost. But it's just the idea to encourage them. It's not that maybe 5 years from now nobody will want to plant in there, but